My landlord tried to evict me for having a service dog. The video evidence I presented in court changed everything. I, 26F, have had my service dog for 3 years now. He's a German Shepherd trained to help with my seizure disorder, and he's literally saved my life more than once. I disclose him on every rental application, provide all his certification paperwork, and make it clear that he's not a pet, but medical equipment protected under the ADA. Last year, I found this decent one-bedroom apartment close to my work. The rent was reasonable for the area, and it seemed perfect. During the application process, I was upfront about my service dog. The property manager assured me it wouldn't be an issue after reviewing my documentation. Everything was fine for the first 4 months. I paid rent on time, kept to myself, and my dog never caused any problems. He's perfectly trained and doesn't bark or destroy property. Then the property got sold to a new landlord. The first time I met him was when he was doing a walkthrough of the building. He knocked on my door without any prior notice and demanded to inspect my unit. When he saw my dog, his entire demeanor changed. "No pets allowed in this building," he snapped. I calmly explained that my dog was a service animal, not a pet, and that the previous landlord had approved him after reviewing my documentation. "I don't care what the old owner did. I don't want dogs in my building. They destroy property and disturb other tenants." I tried to show him my dog's certification and the documentation from my doctor, but he refused to even look at them. Instead, he informed me that I had 30 days to get rid of the dog, or he would begin eviction proceedings. I was shocked. I knew my rights under the Fair Housing Act and the ADA, but he didn't seem to care. When I mentioned these laws, he scoffed and said, "We'll see what a judge has to say about that." After he left, I immediately started documenting everything. I wrote down the date and time of our interaction, and everything that was said. I also contacted a tenant rights organization in my city for advice. They recommended I send a formal letter to the landlord explaining my rights and requesting a reasonable accommodation. So I did exactly that, sending it by certified mail so I'd have proof of delivery. A week passed with no response. Then I received an official eviction notice citing unauthorized pet on premises as the reason. I was terrified. I couldn't afford to move, especially on such short notice, and finding another affordable place that would accept a service dog might take months. Plus, the stress was triggering more frequent seizures, which only reinforced how essential my service dog was to my health and safety. On the advice of the tenant organization, I reached out to a legal aid clinic that specialized in housing discrimination. They agreed to take my case pro bono and help me prepare for the eviction hearing. In the meantime, the landlord's harassment escalated. He started inspecting my apartment weekly, always finding some trivial issue to complain about. He also began doing noisy maintenance work right outside my unit at odd hours. Once, he shut off my water for an entire day without notice, claiming there was a pipe issue that mysteriously only affected my unit. The most concerning incident happened about 2 weeks before our court date. I was returning from walking my dog when I encountered the landlord in the hallway. He blocked my path and started berating me about the dog again. My service dog, sensing my anxiety, positioned himself between us as he's trained to do. The landlord claimed the dog lunged at him and threatened to call animal control to have him seized as a dangerous animal. Fortunately, I had started recording all interactions with the landlord on my phone. The video clearly showed my dog calmly standing in a protective position, not lunging or showing any aggression whatsoever. The landlord was the only one behaving aggressively, pointing and yelling while invading my personal space. When the court date arrived, I was a nervous wreck. The landlord showed up with an expensive-looking attorney, while I had my legal aid lawyer. The landlord's case went first. His attorney painted me as a rule breaker who snuck a dangerous dog into a no-pets building and refused to comply with reasonable property policies. He even submitted a written statement from the landlord claiming my dog had displayed aggressive behavior multiple times, including the lunging incident. Then it was our turn. My lawyer methodically presented my case, showing all my documentation. The original lease application disclosing my service dog, medical documentation of my condition, my dog's training certification, and copies of the reasonable accommodation request I'd sent. She explained how service animals are protected under federal law, and that the landlord's actions constituted discrimination. But the most powerful evidence came when she played the videos I'd recorded. The first showed the initial confrontation when the landlord demanded I get rid of my dog, clearly refusing to even look at my documentation. The second showed him verbally harassing me during one of his inspections, making comments about how he would make me leave one way or another. And the third, the most damning, showed the alleged lunging incident, which clearly demonstrated my dog behaving exactly as a well-trained service animal should while the landlord was the aggressor. The judge's expression changed visibly as he watched the videos. When they finished playing, he removed his glasses and looked directly at the landlord. "Sir, are you familiar with the Fair Housing Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act?" The landlord stammered something about property rights. The judge cut him off. "The law is quite clear on this matter. Service animals are not pets, they are medical necessities. Your attempt to evict this tenant constitutes discrimination under federal law." He then addressed the lunging allegation specifically. "Furthermore, the video evidence directly contradicts your written statement about the dog's behavior. This raises serious concerns about the truthfulness of your testimony." The judge not only dismissed the eviction case but also ordered the landlord to immediately cease all harassment. He referred the case to the local housing authority for further investigation of discrimination charges and suggested I consider filing a civil suit for the harassment I'd endured. After the ruling, the landlord's attorney pulled him aside, and they had an intense whispered conversation. The next day, I received a letter from the attorney offering a settlement: 6 months of free rent, release from my lease with no penalties if I chose to move, and a written apology. They were clearly worried about the housing authority investigation and a potential civil suit. I consulted with my lawyer, who advised me that it was a generous offer. I accepted on the condition that the apology included an acknowledgement of my right to have a service animal and a pledge to follow fair housing laws in the future. They agreed. I used the 6 months of free rent to save up for a down payment on a small condo. I never wanted to deal with a landlord again if I could help it. The experience was traumatic, but it taught me the importance of knowing my rights and documenting everything. For anyone facing similar discrimination, my advice is: know that the law is on your side, document absolutely everything, and don't be afraid to stand your ground. Sometimes justice prevails, especially when you have video evidence that tells the truth. Edit. Thanks for all the supportive comments. A few people asked about my seizure dog's training. He's trained to detect changes in my body chemistry before a seizure happens, alert me so I can get to a safe position, and then provide support during the episode. For those wondering about certification, I should clarify. In the US, there's no official certification or registration for service animals. What I have is documentation of his specialized training and a letter from my neurologist prescribing a service animal for my condition. Sorry for any confusion. Edit 2. Some people asked if I filed a HUD complaint. Yes, the housing authority did investigate, and the landlord ended up paying a fine and having to take fair housing training. I've also heard from other tenants in the building that he's been much more careful about following housing laws since this all went down.